Good evening, and welcome to the Rotary News Network. This is Margie Seaman, your host, from Seaman Realty and Management in downtown Jacksonville. Today I have 3 guests, and I'm very excited to let you hear from them and how they are linked together in an effort to do some dramatic things for our city. I'm going to start with one of the board members, and this is from Volunteer Jacks. I'm going to introduce you to each of the guests here, and then I'll let them tell you a little bit more about themselves. So to my left, I have Burnell Goldman, who is one of the board members of HandsOn Jacksonville, or HandsOn Jacks. Is that the correct way to say it?
Yes, it is.
HandsOn Jacksonville.
HandsOn Jacksonville. Okay. And Burnell, you grew up in the Midwest.
I did.
And you are now the manager of the Omni
General
Hotel?
manager of the Omni Hotel downtown, yes ma'am.
And you came from the Midwest to the East Coast via Cornell, is that correct?
Well, I went to Cornell's hospitality school years ago, and after I graduated, worked in about 8 different cities all over the country, and happened to land in Jacksonville because it was one of my favorite places that I visited during my tenure working in different cities and different hotels. And my wife and I fell in love with it and said if we ever got an opportunity to work here or retire here, we'd love to do it, and I got the opportunity through Omni, and here I am, and we love it, and live at the beach, and love Jacksonville.
You also took a role as a trustee or a governor with the Jacksonville Chamber of Commerce. Could you tell the audience a little bit about that and why?
Sure. Our hotel's always been involved in the chamber, and the general manager typically serves as a trustee level. When I first got here, I was asked if I wanted to renew my involvement. I said, well, let's see what it's all about. And I did. And one of my first interactions that I had with going to the trustees was LeAnn. And we met each other at a trustee connection, and we talked a little bit, and she told me about HandsOn Jacksonville, and she didn't think that I knew what it was, but I did. Because I lived in Indianapolis, and HandsOn Indianapolis did a pretty big project when I was there where they shut down a major highway, major interstate in the middle of the week to plant trees with Eli Lilly Foundation, which I thought was pretty big. It was a big deal for our city to shut down, what would be considered I-95 or I-10, like on a Tuesday in the middle of the day. And for an organization to be able to pull that off, I was pretty impressed. So I told her that, and I think we just hit it off and formed a friendship and partnership, I think, from that first meeting.
Are there HandsOn Jacksonville, are there HandsOn entities throughout the country besides Indianapolis?
Yes, there are.
In every state?
That I'll have to defer to these ladies, but there are a number.
There are about 250 HandsOn affiliates worldwide. We're an international organization convened by the Points of Light, the legacy organization of George Herbert Walker Bush back in 1988 when he spoke about the 1,000 points of light radiating across the community, radiating across the nation to do good. The point that he was making was that government can't do it all, that ordinary citizens can do amazing things when they're inspired and when they're able to get engaged and do good things in the community. So those organizations, that Points of Light organization, legacy organization, now convenes roughly 250 of these organizations worldwide.
Fascinating. Awesome. I'm sorry I didn't introduce you first.
That's okay.
Judy Smith is the existing, the reigning
queen of goddess,
executive director of
President and CEO, actually. And it does make a difference.
Of HandsOn Jacksonville, and you have been in this position for 21 years, is that correct?
Well, it's actually 20 years, but by the time I leave, we're talking in terms of the succession of LeAnn into my position.
Yes.
So by the time I leave, it'll be over 20 and a half years, so I guess I'll be able to say that I do things in 21-year increments. That's how long my Navy career was, too.
Right, so. And I wanted to talk about your Navy career as well, but first let me introduce the successor, LeAnn Daddario.
There you go.
And
Thanks.
LeAnn is right now the CFO. Is that correct?
I am the Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for HandsOn Jacksonville.
HandsOn Jacksonville. And you are going to be taking over Judy
I
Smith's
am.
position.
Big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. In January 2016. So we still have about 8 more months that we are working through the succession planning for the organization.
Which is very ideal for any
Absolutely.
organization, public or private, and very unusual.
Yeah, it's a
True.
good long time for us to really turn it all over. I want to be supportive. I don't want to walk out the door and let her holding the bag. It's a complicated little organization to lead and manage, and you don't really find that out until you start peeling back all the different layers of the onion. So anything that I can do to make LeAnn's stepping into the job easier and better for her, so she doesn't tear her hair out and run screaming out the back door. That's what we don't want happening.
Well, also, like what you probably want to very much protect the things that you've done and left the organization with, to make sure that that can be carried on effectively and cohesively by the successor.
I love what HandsOn Jacksonville is and what it stands for and what it does in our community on a shoestring.
Let's talk about that.
What
does it do?
I often say we have done so much with so little for so long, we're now qualified to do anything with nothing. And too many people believe that. and we can't keep doing everything with nothing. It is a complicated organization, particularly to fund. But our mission is to inspire, equip, and mobilize volunteers to use their time, talent, money, and voice to make a difference in the community and in the world.
Their time, their talent,
Money,
and their voice.
Absolutely. Volunteering has so many different aspects to it. So frequently we just think about, okay, let's get out there and plant a garden or sling some paint on this building or read to some kids or go clean up a neighborhood, or too many times we think of that. But also it matters where you shop, what kind of products you buy, it matters who you give to, and that you give, that you build giving into your ethic. It matters who you advocate for, who you spread the word for. All of those things matter, and volunteers, particularly in this day of all new technologies that can allow us to access so many people in an instant. We talk about, there's a term out there called slacktivism, and that is, okay, you press a button on your iPhone, have you really made a difference? Well, a few years ago when the earthquakes hit Haiti and people were asked to text to the American Red Cross to make a $10 donation, how many people did that when they heard that? A gajillion. Did it make a difference? You bet it made a difference.
Well, it's interesting because I think most nonprofit organizations, of course, they have a mission, and they try to put that mission into effect, and then often say, we need volunteers, actually. But your whole organization is about those volunteers from the outset. And I've been a member of lots of organizations in my life, even in middle school and high school, where you just don't know where to go as a volunteer. And you've perfected the art of volunteerism, and you can communicate that and probably share that and impart a lot of knowledge to other organizations besides your own dedicated crew. Am I correct?
Sure.
Yes.
LeAnn, how are you going to change? How are you going to change HandsOn Jacksonville?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you.
Or how are you going to keep it the same?
Yeah. One of my goals is this. Jacksonville ranks 16 out of 51 metropolitan areas in the country in terms of service and volunteerism. So there's already a culture that exists here, and it's easy, for people to want to volunteer, and service is a part of their lives. What I'd love to see over the next 5 years is let us get into the top 5 in the nation and really foster what we have here and make it even better. How cool to be a resident of this community to say that I live in one of the top 5 cities in the country that supports service and volunteerism. It really speaks to the character and the heart of the people that live in your community. People want to come to that kind of community. They want to come visit that kind of community. They want to live in that community. They want to raise their children in that community. It's really kind of one of those beacon things for us as an organization to do. And I really feel like we can do that. We've had, in the past 3 decades, really significant strides in volunteering. And I so often say when I go out and speak publicly, volunteerism has become a benchmark for our society. If people really think about it, our high school children need volunteer service hours. When folks are applying to college, they're looking at what did you do extracurricular, volunteer-wise. When millennials are coming out of college, they want to work for companies that are doing great things in the community. And on the flip side, those companies are tracking volunteer hours and what did we do in the community. So it's really become this benchmark. A lot of that, have to credit the HandsOn Network and Points of Light for continuing to talk about it and educate companies and communities, because we have so many folks that come to us and it's now a part of their mission and vision statement. Corporate America has caught on. Where we do business, we need to give back to those communities, and it in turn gives us business. We have happier employees, employee morale. We have goodwill in the community. There's multiple reasons why companies want to work with HandsOn Jacksonville to make an impact in their community. So to go back and answer your original question, it's to expand that. It's to put us more on the national map. I would love to see our rankings get higher and then be a part of a community where we can continue to tout that kind of message.
Well, you started out with a household of folks who really imbued that message and lived that message. And I think it's fairly significant, if you think I'm wrong, please say so, that you inherited that outlook on life. And even though HandsOn Jacksonville can bring this to us on a silver platter, literally, I think if parents recognize that they can actually influence their kids so early on, it makes it a lot easier for all of the organizations to benefit.
Absolutely.
Your dad was very significant in your...
Yes, my family was really, did a lot around service and volunteerism. So my father was very active in Rotary. He was the president of his Rotary Club. I grew up down in South Florida, so I can remember a lot of Rotary functions, and so he did a lot around service and volunteerism, as you all do as an organization. He was involved on the board at Boy Scouts, and we went to church on a very regular basis, and I can remember going on a service trip to Jamaica and teaching orphans in their vacation Bible school and painting their buildings, and so all of those kinds of things. And what happens is when kids grow up in that kind of environment, they don't know any different because that's their norm. And so I can remember with my own son, when he was 12, we went down into St. Augustine and we volunteered at the homeless shelter. And my husband and my son and I were on an assembly line. Somebody had dropped off tons of fruit, citrus fruit, and we made fresh juice for lunch and dinner that day, for the homeless residents. So when it gets ingrained, they don't know any different, and then they take that and they pay it forward, and then they teach their children. So you're bringing up generations by modeling that behavior within your own families, and then they take that out into their communities.
The whole concept of family volunteering is so important. It's not enough that we say, okay, our kids need to go volunteer because they need to get service hours so that they can get in a good college, and it'll make all the difference on their application. What's important is for the family to volunteer together because you are modeling those behaviors.
Right.
I too came from a family that volunteered. My father was a teacher, but he was also, we lived in a small town, so we had a volunteer fire department. And when that fire whistle went, he was gone like a shot, no matter what he was doing. And it was an all-volunteer group that literally responded to fires in that community.
And then you
So-
put a huge section of your life into the Navy, which was also
Yes.
a long time.
21 years. 21 years. I retired. I loved every minute of my service, but I was also ready to leave because I had found the community where we wanted to put our roots down. We came to Jacksonville, my husband and I. He retired as the executive officer at Naval Station Mayport. We came here with every intention. We got married and said, anywhere in the world, give us good jobs together. And when our detailers said, well, we've got some great jobs for the two of you in Jacksonville, Florida, I thought, oh, not Florida again. Because I had spent time in Pensacola and I really didn't want to come back to Florida. And that's all there was to it. So we came kicking and screaming, claw marks all the way from DC down here. And we were planning on staying for 2 years and heading north of the Mason-Dixon line somewhere. And we got down here in 1986, telling my age now, long time ago. And in May of 1987, the USS Stark was hit by an Iraqi missile. And my husband coordinated the visit of President and Mrs. Reagan. So we got to see the way this community responded to the deaths of 37 sailors and the fact that there would be a presidential memorial service here. The community, the volunteers in the community said, and led by a wonderful woman who used to work at Channel 4 by the name of Lee Nixon, they said, we're not going to have a presidential memorial service here with the First Lady and the President, both, without bringing the surviving family members, because they're scattered all over the country. And this community mobilized the hotel rooms, the airfare, the in and around transportation, the meals while they were here. The day of the service, as we drove into Naval Station Mayport, the streets were lined with people reaching out, offering their condolences and their sympathies. I can still get real choked up about this. I've told this story so many times, and yet every time I tell it, I go back to that date. And that, I'm not kidding on this either, that very date, my husband and I looked at each other and said, I think we found the place that we're going to pitch our tent. And it wasn't because of, I often say it wasn't because the state bird is a mosquito and the state mammal is a cockroach. We aren't in love with those things about Florida. We're in love with the people in Jacksonville. And it's the people in Jacksonville. You like that one?
I like
Yeah,
that one.
it's
I use that one.
But the people here are different. And LeAnn gave you the statistic a little while ago about Jacksonville being the 16th. And yes, we're going to do better than that. We have done better than that. We have one time hit number 5, and we know, she knows, we can do that again. But to give you a frame of reference, Florida is not the best state for a variety of reasons for volunteering. And if you compare us with the other 3 large metropolitan statistical areas of Florida, that's where you really get a sense of just how amazing Jacksonville is. Miami ranks 51 out of 51. Orlando ranks, it's either 46 or 48.
What makes it a challenge in Jacksonville to be a volunteer?
It's not a challenge.
Okay.
It's not a challenge. We have a much higher volunteering rate than any of our sister cities. 51st place, 48th place, 34th place, Tampa, and then us at 16. That is pretty doggone amazing. I think there's a challenge in Florida because we have so many people who are here from somewhere else and who are more connected in the communities where they may snowbird back and forth to, or where they grew up and put down their roots and then came here to live in their retirement years.
Although I have to take issue with that a little bit, in that in Jacksonville, one of the beauties of the city is that we don't have a snowbird population,
Yes,
which
right.
means that it's a very
Right.
stable place to raise a family
Right.
because your
Now,
neighbors don't leave.
Yes, I was looking at why maybe the
other
other
cities,
areas
yeah.
in Florida
That would explain that.
have a much lower a much lower percentage rate
That would make
than we do.
sense.
We have a great place to live. We have a great place to raise kids. It's just different here, and the people are different here. I have never met such friendly people in all my life.
I agree. I agree. One of the nice things that comes out of volunteering sometimes is that you become paid, and that is an extension of where your heart and your vision might be, instead of necessarily going directly to earning bigger money, because we know that we don't go into nonprofit for the money.
That's right.
But it would be an interesting story, LeAnn, if you could tell how you and Judy met.
Yeah.
Because I believe it was through a volunteer service that you were doing. Am I
That's
correct?
exactly right, and I'm actually still involved with that organization, American Fundraising Professionals. And it was, let's see, maybe 3-4 years ago that HandsOn Jacksonville had nominated one of their donors for National Philanthropy Day, and we hold that in November. And I had a volunteer opportunity myself, and I was the chair of the video committee. And so we worked with a local partner here, and we were going out and interviewing the award winners. And the donor was there, as well as Judy was there. And so I got a chance to initially meet her, and we hit it off. Who couldn't hit it off with Judy? And at the time, I was working down in St. Johns County. And then subsequently, we got together and we had a meeting about how maybe we could work with her down in St. Johns County. And she was very strategic in her approach. And about once a quarter, I would get an email from her. And she'd say, oh, this job is open, or that job is open. And I was just like, oh, that's so sweet that you would think of me. She had another mission in mind. I didn't know. It was a little covert. And so she had a position become available, and lo and behold, she said, you were the first person I thought about. And she said, will you come talk? And I said, of course I'll come talk. So I came and talked, and thus the marriage began. We were dating back then. Now we've cemented it.
That's an amazing story, because it really does take you from service to compensation and service, which is a very beautiful ending to a career, to a passion for volunteering.
We work with amazing people. I say this all the time. Our organization is an umbrella organization. So if your passion are animals, if your passion is homelessness, if your passion is education, if your passion is children, volunteerism and service covers all of that. And so we are able to plug into so many different areas and do so many different projects around the community. And we serve the most incredible people. We volunteer and work with the most incredible people. We have a board that's committed to what we do. And Judy always says it's great to be us. Well, it is. I mean, at the end of the day, you lay your head down on the pillow and you are impacting lots of people in this community through volunteerism and service. It's an amazing position to have.
We often say, well, our primary customer is the volunteer. Our primary partners in the work that we do are certainly the nonprofit organizations. But our primary customer, the focus of everything that we do, is the volunteer. We want the volunteer's experience to be a good one so that they will go back and back and back, and it will become just part of their being. The statistics out there say that, oh my gosh, 1 out of every 3 people who volunteer say, I'm done. I'll never do that again. And it's because their skills were not used, wasn't what they expected, they were treated poorly, they weren't thanked. When you're giving the most precious thing you have, which is not your money, but your time, when you are giving your time to an organization to help it, it's the least that someone can do.
It's
to
sacred.
say, thank you. Yeah, it is a sacred trust.
Now, I do remember when we spoke last week, you said something that really stuck in my head. No money, no mission.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I don't remember where I first heard that, probably 20 years ago, probably reading when I suddenly had to become an expert on this stuff. I started reading every book that I could. I'm sure I read it in some book. No money, no mission. Every nonprofit organization really has two missions, and that is to do the good work that you say that you're telling the community that you're doing with their resources. But then the other mission side by side is you better have the resources to do it, because no money, no mission.
Now, let's go back to you, Burnell.
Sure.
Do you feel that as a board member, the board is generating ideas for Judy and LeAnn, or are Judy and LeAnn generating ideas that they want to see will pass muster on your board?
There are several signature events that HandsOn Jax has, but I think that Judy and LeAnn have put together a board that is starting to come up with ideas and starting that process. I think that, there's been some transition in the board, and there's some new blood, and I don't want to, such as myself, that's on the board. And so I think you will start to see a lot more ideas that come from the board, a lot more activities that may come from the board. But this organization is really good at coming up with ideas and events that have been very successful over the years. So I'm sure those signature events will continue to be the cornerstone of the organization. But I'm sure if there's any other opportunities to raise funds or awareness for the organization, I'm sure that the organization will be open to new opportunities.
All right, so LeAnn,
Yes.
as an example, we probably have about 3 minutes left.
Okay.
As an example, tell us about a recent situation where a nonprofit needed volunteers and called you, and you were able to
Well, I
rise
can
to
tell
the
you, I was
call.
actually, we talked a little bit about the chamber. I was at the chamber's annual meeting event earlier this year, and I ran into a woman who actually works with a local nonprofit here in town, and she said, "You're from HandsOn Jacksonville?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "We use their mission is around pets," and she said, "We use 350 of your volunteers. We have a database of over 7,000 volunteers. You guys are critical to what we do around volunteerism." And so she was just so happy to meet me, put a name with a face, and that happens all year long. I mean, we have corporate volunteer projects, and then we have nonprofits where we're sending volunteer projects, and then we have our own projects that we at HandsOn Jacksonville own, if you will. So multiple ways.
So pets.
Yes.
All right, so there's people who are very passionate about pets.
Absolutely.
Do you have a database of those people versus the people who might be more passionate about working with homeless residents?
Well,
or
here's how the database
drug
works.
addicted?
So if you go to www.handsonjacksonville.org.
What was that again?
www.handsonjacksonville.org. You can search our database, and you can do that a number of ways. You can search on a specific day for an opportunity. You can search by an organization, or you can do a keyword search. So in this case, I'm not sure how these folks did this, but you could search for pets, and it'll give you all of the volunteer opportunities around pets. So you can do it multiple different ways, and that way you can find something that you can really plug into in your time frame, and then you can work with one of our partner agencies, and you can volunteer for them. And I think that's what happened in this case.
This is wonderful for the audience, because there is unemployment, and volunteering is sometimes the perfect segue into a job.
Absolutely.
Whether it's in that particular organization or somebody that you meet while you're volunteering.
Absolutely.
And the research supports that.
It does.
I think it's 27% higher your chances are of finding a job if you volunteer. That goes up to
Really?
about 50% if you are not a high school graduate. And if you live in rural areas, it drives up to 55%.
Yeah.
So we now have the research done by the Corporation for National and Community Service that supports that volunteering is a pathway into the workplace.
Well, that is very powerful. I think that's a very powerful note to leave our audience with. We have 1 minute left. I'm going to give each of you, 20 seconds of that, starting now, to either talk about an event that's coming up or just a closing comment. Judy, let's start with you.
I'll start with a closing
reigning
comment.
queen.
The reigning queen. I'll start with a closing comment, and that comes from George Herbert Walker Bush, that a successful life, no matter how you define it, must include service to others. And that is just something that we carry as one of our core beliefs in the organization. And I just want to end with that.
Okay, thank you. It's
No
beautiful.
matter how you define life.
LeAnn.
The next thing that's really coming up on our plate, April is actually National Volunteer Month nationwide, is Celebrate Good. And that's really where we are celebrating volunteers, nonprofit volunteers and corporate volunteers. We will be at Unity Plaza at the end of this month.
Okay.
And
We have to wrap it up.
Okay.
But Unity
There you
Plaza
go.
at the end of this month. And Burnell?
check out our website.
Oh, just wanted to say I'm very happy to be associated with these ladies. You can see all the energy that takes place on
Fabulous.
HandsOn Jacksonville, and
We
why
have-
I won't be a part of that.
We are so lucky to have all three of you. Thank you for being our guests, and thank you Comcast for hosting and making the show possible, and thank you viewers for tuning in, and good night.